Waiting for that. Welcome back to another episode of Bedlam Beyond Mental Illness. We are still working on the whole Discord thing like we talked about last time. I asked my kid. He's totally down for helping me figure out how the heck to navigate that. Yes, we're old. I didn't say that.
Well, I don't know what old is anymore, but I'm definitely older. So
True. But yes, we're totally still working on that. We will get it done, and once we get it done, we'll share the server whatever with everybody. I was telling my kid, oh, I need to make this, and he's like, you mean a channel or a server or this or that? I'm like, what? So we're going to work on it. We will let you know when it is done. There was something else I wanted to say to everyone. I don't remember what it is, though. We'll remember it later.
I can't help you because I don't know.
No, yeah, it's okay. So this week, I didn't even know the topic until I was typing it into the computer because she wanted to surprise me.
Wanted to be a big secret.
It's awesome. So Renata did the research this time, so I'm just gonna sit back.
I'm gonna admit that my research was kind of like a little bit hodgepodgey, a little bit all over the place, but this particular topic came into my head because of something that happened fairly recently. I'm going to be talking about what we used to call nervous breakdowns, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to touch a little bit on how Hollywood treated nervous breakdowns, or what Hollywood was calling nervous breakdowns. We'll give you some examples of that. But when I was a kid, the term nervous breakdown was around a lot. And so that would have been like in the 70s. You heard nervous breakdown if somebody like your friend's parent was gone for months, or a teacher was gone, or you would hear they had a nervous breakdown. And that, like when I was a little kid, that had some dangerous sort of secret connotation. I had no idea what it meant. I was afraid of what it actually did. It mean a part of you actually broke down? I had no idea what it meant.
And isn't that amusing how like we don't tell kids what things mean? Oh yeah, it's nervous breakdown, or it's whatever it is. It's cancer. It's whatever, depression, whatever. And we just don't explain what the heck it is to kids, so kids will visualize the worst possible thing.
Particularly because you were a kid with a vivid imagination. If I don't know the truth, I'm making it up.
Yeah,
and it's going to be scarier than it probably is.
Right?
Yeah,
it's going to be way scarier than it is.
Yeah.
Okay,
so I'm going to cite my sources.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to get started. And I, again, did not commit any of this to memory, so I will be looking down to read.
I didn't either.
I wish I was that person. I'm not.
No.
Okay, so my sources are backlots.net, listverse.com, allthatisinteresting.com.
I like that. All that is interesting.
Allthatisinteresting.com, yeah.
That's a good name.
And then an article called In Search of the Good Old Nervous Breakdown by Ronnie Karen Rabin. In Search of the Good Old Nervous Breakdown. So I found myself thinking about the term nervous breakdown, wondering where the heck it went just recently, because I had taken my 18-year-old niece for a tattoo.
Right.
And the tattooist, is that what they call themselves? Tattoo artist.
Yes.
Was very open, talked about a lot of stuff, because you're there for hours on end.
He's awesome. He was my tattoo artist.
I tried to get him to come on and like let us interview.
That would be awesome.
He totally shut me down. But anyway,
one
of the things that he was telling us was that he'd recently, he'd had a nervous breakdown. And I asked him how old he was, because I was like, people don't say that anymore.
Okay.
And he's around my age.
Yeah.
I think he's close to 50, or he's in his 50s.
Yeah.
So that didn't surprise me, right? Like I was like, yeah, because it is a term that my generation heard a lot, and you just don't hear it anymore. My niece was like,
confused.
What now?
What do they call it now?
They would just refer, because we're so much more open and candid about it, they would just call it what it is. He would say, I had an acute episode of whatever his diagnosis is, for which I had to seek treatment, hospitalization, blah, 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 right? We just say it. Yeah. We don't codify it anymore. Okay. So nervous breakdown, in quotation marks, was the malady everyone suffered from in Hollywood from the 1930s to the 1960s and into the 70s, if you lived in a small town in the Niagara region. When they didn't want to say the star wasn't, quite right, like something's going on, they would just, it was a big blanket nervous breakdown.
I think Hollywood still uses that. Maybe not.
Do they?
I don't know if they use nervous breakdown, but they definitely say, they had a breakdown, or they
there is a euphemism they use. I'll refer to it later on. So yeah, you're onto it, sister. So this was also the era of sweeping everything under the rug. So nowadays there'd likely be an array of diagnoses instead, such as whatever it is that your actual diagnosis is. Because in our current world, we speak frankly and openly about things that were once quite taboo. So according to that article that I cited, the term nervous breakdown is a vague catch-all phrase that could mean anything from a psychotic episode to having a bad day. Not a medical term, but a popular one that was used because it was gentle, non-specific, and so non-threatening.
I guess at the time they started using it, maybe it was gentle and non-threatening. But when I think about it now, I'm like, nervous breakdown. Oh man, you cray. Like that's
obviously as
the
a
way
kid,
it's been portrayed.
I didn't think it was gentle. I didn't think it was a gentle term at all when I was a kid.
No.
And exactly. Nervous breakdown just means crazy.
Right? Like gone postal.
Sure. Oops, I think I just went ahead a little bit.
Oh, whoopsies.
So it may have the nervous breakdown phrase may have even garnered a certain cash, is what the article said. So a certain kind of a status symbol. To an extent, right? Because Hollywood, right?
Right. Oh, I'm just so famous that I can't handle it all.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
If anybody's ever done any sort of even a little modicum of research into Hollywood and like old Hollywood, you probably have heard of like Judy Garland, Frances Farmer. They were often described as having nervous breakdowns, even when their problems might have been more accurately described as alcoholism or drug abuse.
PTSD, I'm going to go with.
Anything, right?
Yeah.
There was a 1961 Academy Award winning movie, Splendor in the Grass. Have you heard of it? Natalie Wood, Warren Beatty.
I feel like I've heard of it. I have no idea about it, but for some reason it sounds familiar.
Very famous. She plays a lovesick young woman from a small town in Kansas who is institutionalized after being abandoned by her boyfriend, a wealthy Yale student played by Warren Beatty.
You know what might be interesting? And you guys can let us know. But what if sometimes we research like movies about mental?
I would love that. We could watch them. We could do
a whole little thing. Because I was thinking of Girl Interrupted when you said that. I was like, oh, Girl Interrupted, because that's one of my favorite ones.
I actually have the book somewhere, which I'll dig up and I'll give to you to read. I read that before the movie came out. I was very happy with the movie, actually.
Did not even know it was a book first.
Yeah.
But it's one of my favorite ones. And actually, and that one's fairly well known, but there's another one that I have that we'll have to watch together, and then we'll do an episode of it. It's called Breaking Dawn. It is not very well known.
Who's in it?
Oh, shit, I don't know.
I'm sorry. Don't ask those questions.
Right? But it's really good. I don't want to give too much away because I don't want you to know what's going to happen, but it's like it's thriller category.
Are we going to do like a reaction?
We totally should.
That's good. I like that.
That sounds like fun.
All right.
It's on the books now.
I'm trying to scoot forward, but this chair keeps rolling back.
Well, my house is over 100 years old, so the floor might not be quite.
I blame the chair, not myself. Okay. Where was I?
I don't know, but I'm going to write down our idea. Keep going.
Okay. So in the last 50-ish years, the world has, of course, changed dramatically, including in the way that we understand mental disorders. Treatments varied from the, in quotation marks, rest cure.
Rest cure? Oh, rest like cure. All you need is rest.
Go to the sanatorium and rest. Here's a lawn chair. Yeah. Rest cure, isolation, preventing all stimulation. This was like in the 19th century-ish. Okay. To hydrotherapy, electric shock treatments, insulin treatments, which I don't know how they did that.
What
Like
is
why? So we
that?
have to look into that.
Yeah, I'm gonna add this to our list. Insulin treatments. What the
And
heck?
lobotomy.
Which I've already started the research on, guys. I'm so excited.
Gonna be interesting that, yeah. Patients who were hospitalized within that time frame were often facing long-term commitments. That's another thing, right? They were committed.
Right. Yeah. Everything is about committed. Well, that's the theme with how they used to talk. I shouldn't say used to. I think a lot of people still say it this way for suicide. They committed suicide, right? But the new lingo that I learned when I was at Port Care is like, that's gonna be like 10 years ago now.
Not that new.
It's not super new, but in the grand scheme, I mean, we've talked about how long ago all these things started. So it
takes a while for things to gain traction.
Right? Yeah. Instead of saying committed suicide, it was died by suicide. Yes. Right. Yes. So how would you change being committed to a sanatorium? Because
and not calling it institutionalized either.
Right. That's a big one too.
Huh. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know
either.
People are no longer just disappearing from the community in the same way that they used to when the term was coined and was in use. The major emphasis now is on recovery, and that was said by Dr. Daryl Regier, director of the American Psychiatric Association Division of Research.
I tried to look to see if I could say it.
Regier, Regier.
I think so.
Regier. So yeah, now it's on recovery. It's on recovery. It's on maintenance. It's on proactive sort of prevention of the return of symptoms,
which is a huge shift, actually, being preventative, unlike our medical system.
Right.
Sorry, I'm not
largely
into that.
Reactive, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Psychiatrists emphasize that the term nervous breakdown is utterly meaningless from a medical clinical point of view.
Which I think is so interesting because, like you said, nervous breakdown was the term, but it wasn't medical at all.
At all.
Which is, I didn't realize.
Yeah. Probably coined by somebody in media.
It must have been.
If patients today use it to describe a crisis they went through, or when they're giving a family history, a clinician will not be like, "Oh, nervous breakdown." They'll say, like, "What do you mean by that?
Right?
What does that look like?" But yeah, they'll ask for specifics.
Yeah, because even when I had my nervous breakdown, it was a mental health leave. It all came back to the depression, and that's why I went off. Right? Twice. You know how that goes. But that's just it. It would have been coined as a nervous breakdown, and
yes,
it kind of felt that way.
Yeah,
like
sure.
It felt like complete breakdown. Not so much the nervous part is a weird word when I'm thinking about how I felt when I went off for it, because I wasn't nervous about stuff, but it was like a total breakdown in life, like
functioning.
Functioning in life, and it all rooted back to the mental illness.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. They go on to say saying you had a nervous breakdown would be like saying someone had a fever instead of diagnosing different types of infection. Like, why do you have the fever? Why do you, right?
Yeah.
In 1952, and you kind of touched on this, I think, last time, only 106 types of mental disorders were listed in the DSM.
I didn't say that how many, but
106 types.
How many are listed now?
Currently, 297. So nearly 3 times.
Yeah, dang.
Yeah, 297. Since the 1950s, the number of institutionalized patients, now this is American stats, the number of institutionalized patients in the U.S. has dropped from 550,000 to fewer than 30,000 inpatients.
Wow, and that's like the inpatient.
Yeah. Patients themselves have changed. Now people are much more educated about medical conditions and aggressive in seeking information. In the age of tell-all TV shows and support groups, people don't shy away from calling things by their real names.
Which is huge. So I think we need to talk about this. It was like what, 550,000, 100,000.
550,000.
550,000, and now down to less than 30. All because people are now talking about it, seeking, being proactive.
the advances in treatment, the advances in understanding, right? I think understanding takes us very, very far in terms of how we
It for sure does.
treat.
Well, and we used to say, my husband and I used to say this when our kid was young and going through, for lack of a better term, batshit crazy time. Like, it's so hard to describe. But the serious violent meltdowns that can come along with autism. And we would be like, if this was 50 years ago, he'd be in the insane asylum.
He'd have been taken from you.
Yeah, he would have been
There
taken.
Would have been limited to no contact. Yeah.
Yeah, and he wouldn't have got any support. They would have locked him in a padded room and been
lots of drugs to shut him down.
Yeah,
lots of drugs. Yeah,
right. And now, I mean, you look at him. He's driving. He's graduated. He's going to college. Like,
yeah, major advances.
So this is huge. Thank
goodness, because it points to the fact that I try to frequently make with people at my job.
Yes.
Which is that your mental health condition, your mental illness, it's not the only thing about you, right? It doesn't define you. It doesn't define your entire self. It doesn't mean that you are not. I live with depression. I am also capable of maintaining full-time employment. Right. I live with depression. I am also capable of maintaining friendships, whatever, right? It doesn't mean that you can't do things.
Right. But 50 years ago,
the choice would have been removed from us.
That's what it is.
Yes.
The choice would have been removed.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is huge.
So our favorite euphemism that we use today, particularly regarding celebrities, is exhaustion, which is often code for substance abuse. Exhaustion is a phrase that we hear a lot of.
Why do you think they still cover up that celebrities are having substance abuse issues?
Shame? I don't know.
That's a good question, because like some of them do come out later and they say,
eventually
that's why.
Acknowledge it. Yeah. Maybe they're people who handle them are telling them not to.
Your PR team, probably. But I do think shame. That's probably a good first answer, because it. And maybe the stigma, maybe they're like, oh, I won't get another job, or people will stop liking me because of the
perception of them being somehow weaker. Especially
with substance abuse, though, because a lot of people still have a hard time accepting substance abuse as a mental illness.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? They still think that is more of a choice than an illness.
Yeah. A lot of people still kind of aim a lot of judgment and hate at people who suffer from addiction.
Okay.
Yes, that is true. The term nervous breakdown was defined by pop culture. During World War II, there was a doctor, Dr. Menninger, who served as chief psychiatric consultant for the Surgeon General of the United States Army. Mm. He developed the concept of the breaking point.
Oh.
Which was originally applied to soldiers in combat, but was later extended to the strains of everybody in modern life. But the breaking point, which is probably where breakdown came from.
Probably. And I don't know, I think breaking point is valid. Like everybody has that point, and everybody's point is different.
Yeah. So this next point kind of segues into, I'm going to talk about a couple of Hollywood actresses. In the 50s and 60s, and before that for sure, I would say 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, there was a lot that I found about women.
Women were actually, before you said that, my mind immediately popped to women, and we should maybe do an episode on women and how they were treated with mental illness, because back in the day, if a woman even voiced a different opinion, I mean, way back in the day, she was a witch, but back in the day, she was hysteria.
She was shut down. Yeah, she was hysteria.
You have hysteria. You're hysteric.
Hysterical womb, wandering uterus, lots of different phrases. Many women were trapped in very narrow societal roles as mothers, housewives. In 1963, Betty Friedan wrote The Feminine Mystique, which talked about this. The problem that has no name. So a lot of these may have just been women who weren't allowed to have a voice, and so they did resort to.
Yeah.
not just, you know, not just living with mental illness, but they did resort to substance abuse or whatever.
Yeah.
And then were described as having had a nervous breakdown. Okay. So here's an example. Jean Tierney, spelled Gene, last name Tierney, was she was an actress in the 30s and 40s. She was born in 1920, died in 1991.
Wow, that's a long life.
In 1943, after the birth of her first child, she began showing signs of mental instability. Which, postpartum?
That's what I would think, right? Because
Right?
you've had your kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, postpartum would make sense.
I think she was eventually diagnosed with bipolar.
That would come a long way because remember, bipolar really wasn't a thing till the 80s.
Yeah, I don't know what they called it, but yeah.
That's that circular.
Yeah, what was it again?
Oh, we just did this episode.
I know, I can't remember.
It's so bad, but
can't remember
insane. There's something insane. Oh, how do we not remember what we just did this episode like 2 weeks ago? I'm gonna blame on the fact that I went camping, so my brain is all fresh.
I'm just not blaming on anything. I just can't remember anything. If I don't have,
Go back and watch the other episode, guys, and let us know what
we talked about, what they called it.
Yeah.
And she apparently committed herself, which is interesting language. We talked about that already. Committing yourself,
right?
When you're seeking help, you're committing yourself. She received multiple shock treatments. She would later claim that the treatments greatly impacted her memory, and she vocally opposed them. Of course they did.
Yeah.
Right. In 1957, she was apparently seen attempting suicide and was admitted to a clinic where, this is interesting, she anonymously worked part-time as a sales girl as part of her treatment.
What?
I don't know. I could delve into it. I didn't because I was like, yeah, I don't have time, but I was like, how is that? How is that treatment? Anyway, she in 1979, she wrote about her experiences, and she was among the first sort of famous starlet who did that.
Okay.
Then she was able to manage her condition until she passed away. And then I found another. Hers is one of many similar stories that I found about early Hollywood, all of them about women, which may or may not point to the separate issue of misogyny and how women's issues were downplayed and otherwise negatively treated, as we already know. The story of Frances Farmer.
We have a picture.
Frances Farmer, she was famously played by Jessica Lange in a 1982 movie called Frances. She was a stage actor who made her Hollywood debut in 1936. During the 40s, the media of the day began to focus on reports of her erratic behavior and not on her acting, you know. In 1943, she was sentenced to 6 months in jail after throwing an inkwell at a judge and assaulting 2 police officers in court.
Oh, snap.
And that's what that picture is from. She was upset because they wouldn't allow her to use the phone after her sentencing. She apparently was in court because she was arrested after she was fined for drunk driving. She was given a certain amount of time to pay her fines. She hadn't paid it, so that's why she was arrested.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. She was transferred from prison to a sanatorium where she was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. I don't know if that stuck. And then she was in and out of psychiatric facilities until she passed away in 1970. The movie Frances, by the way, was based on a book. The author made all these claims about her, saying that she'd been lobotomized and different things like that. He later sued the filmmakers. Like, the movie did very well. I remember it because I would have been like I think a young teenager in 1982. So I remember the movie. It did very, very well. It was very popular. He sued the filmmakers probably because he didn't get any money or enough money.
Probably.
But he actually admitted that a lot of what he had written was made up, including the lobotomy part. So, in the media of the time, reporters were quick to mock erratic behavior of women actors and seemed to blame them for the things they were doing and the things happening to them. In today's time, actors speak candidly about their mental illness, mental health journeys. Even if media wanted to dismiss or ridicule them, they are aware there would be a major public outcry backlash against such a thing. In addition to having a mental illness, many of today's actors openly discuss how certain roles have been difficult to get back from. So they'll talk about their mental health, that they've had to seek therapy because they've lost themselves in the role. Zendaya said, "Your body is a person. doesn't know that what you're doing is not real. She was referring to filming certain scenes in season 2 of Euphoria. She said, my brain can say, okay, I'm pretending. But when I'm doing it, my body and my heart don't know that it's not real. It can be exhausting. It can make you feel bad. Yeah. So that's sense. Interesting. Yeah. It's interesting admission for her to make. And then it makes you wonder about all the people who have been famous, who have either succumbed to.
Well, that's what they say about Heath Ledger.
Yes. Right? Yeah. Yeah. So I have a question.
Okay. Ready?
For those of us who are not famous actors, but who maybe act in our day-to-day, like, for example, maybe what we call masking to fit in as a normal person.
Or anyone in customer service.
Right? You know how you're supposed to behave in order to be deemed normal.
Yeah.
So you behave in a certain way, you act, you say things, whatever. Do you think the same applies? Like, our body and our hearts don't know that it's not real, so they're going through the motions of what we're pretending to feel, like the fake it till you make it. Do you think that's okay? Or do you think it's similarly exhausting?
Well, it's definitely exhausting.
It is exhausting.
Like 100% it's exhausting.
Yeah.
Especially that whole masking thing is super exhausting. My mom used to always say to me, fake it till you make it.
I have friends who still say it, and I'm like,
right? And my mom would say it because I would be, I don't know, not want to go do something as a kid or not want to be around people. Well, just fake it till you make it and just put on a smile. I think there is something to be said, though, about when you do put on a smile or when you laugh, you are pretending and your brain is going, oh, okay, happy hormones because we're laughing, right? So I think there's a little bit something to say there that you can
there's
trick
probably
yourself.
Scientific research that supports that. I bet you.
I bet you there probably. I bet you could. Yeah. She says we. So I definitely think there is something to be said about faking it, but there is also a limit because it is exhausting.
It is exhausting
to try and fit in, especially to fit into these little standards that are set for us. Like, why we gotta fit in a box? I don't like it. I am claustrophobic. I would like out of the box.
Yeah.
That would make a good merch, you know? I would like a box, like something like that. I don't know.
Say that again.
We could make merch for our store, for our show, and it could be like out of a box. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up.
Just we'll work on it.
Yeah. Huh. Well, that is interesting. I never realized that nervous breakdown was not like a medical term.
No, a pop media made up term, based probably on something real.
Yeah.
But then, you know how media does.
Yeah, media is.
And then it was really just a really used term up until I would say I was a teenager, maybe early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, by the time that I stopped hearing it.
I'm gonna say I heard it in the 90s.
Did you?
Yeah, as a small child, but later it became more mental breakdown. It wasn't nervous breakdown; it was now mental breakdown in the 2000s. I feel like,
or just had a breakdown.
Yeah, had a breakdown. Yeah, they took out the nervous part because again, I feel like the nervous doesn't make sense. Having experienced a type of breakdown, nervous doesn't fit what I was feeling. So.
Maybe whoever made it up thought it was a catch-all.
That's what it sounds like.
Right, for everything.
Yeah.
Possible thing.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. Well, if you guys have any questions or comments or want us to explore another specific topic or have a movie choice for us, now that we're going to look at some. Yeah. Obviously throw them in the comments. We will definitely take a peruse at them. And be sure to tune in tomorrow morning, 9:30 a.m. Eastern for the Right or Die show. I know the guest is named Allison. I'm trying to think. I feel like we're going to talk about depression. I think that's what we're talking about tomorrow. Trying to remember. Anyways, we all know my memory doesn't work. So tune in tomorrow at 9:30 because then you don't have to actually rely on my memory because it will be just going.
There you go.
All right. Bye.